Alright, so in this video, I've got the task of giving you my top 30 tiers and rankings for the running back position week 4 fantasy football, and I've really enjoyed making this style of content here throughout this portion of the season so far. I think it's a nice, accurate way that doesn't necessarily get too caught up in numeric rankings to show and illustrate my thoughts and feelings about various lineup pieces. So sit back and relax, you guys. If you're new around here, smash that subscribe button, turn the bell on so you never miss a piece of content from SFS here, and let's dive into the tiers list for week 4. All right, here we go. Smash that like button as we get started. As always, I'm going to give you a quick overview of the tiers for today. First and foremost, we've got the elite running backs 1 tier. These are the guys I feel the most confident with in my lineup here. There's been a lot of changing at the running back position. Maybe you don't feel as comfortable and confident in a lot of the players that you did during the draft process. We'll talk through that as we place players in that tier coming up in just a second. Strong running back ones are guys that I think have a good shot to finish top 12 here. But of course, the unpredictability has been felt here the last few weeks. Bubble running back ones, guys that could either slide up in the top 12 or fall significantly down depending on game script, and then repeat and rinse and repeat here for the running back 2s positions. It's the same type of stuff. Guys I'm feeling really strong about in the elite RB2s category for that group, and then strong running back 2s, so on and so forth, down to our RB3s, which are going to be guys that are lower end flex plays for this week. So with that being said, let's reveal the first tier. All right, here we go. So I will preface this. These are tiers based on half PPR scoring. Another thing, if you're looking for a little bit more insight into my rankings for this list, simply follow the video and the names, obviously from the top tier on down here from left to right. So Jonathan Taylor is still my running back 1 for this week. JT's got the Tennessee Titans here, and frankly, he just needs touches. We saw his biggest game struggle come in week 2 where they didn't really get him involved. It was a terrible game script. They got blown out by the Jaguars, and it was a miserable football game to watch, Then you come back this past week, and he's not really getting red zone touches to the extent you would like to see here, or at least, cashing those in for points. However, you still are getting production workhorse level opportunities. So this is a stable player right now, someone that I think has a high floor. The ceiling popped in week 1, but we haven't seen that come out since. Nick Chubb, the actual current RB1, who would have thought that he would be up here in the elite running back 1s tier in one of my videos with how critical I've been on his fantasy outlook. But hey, consistency has been king so far amongst the running back position, and not many guys have been able to relay that to our fantasy lineup. So the fact that Nick Chubb is doing so is something I place a high valuation on, just straightforward and as simple as that needs to be. And even though he's not catching passes, he's had 20 or more opportunities every single game this season. He's incredibly efficient, as always, playing behind one of the best O-lines in football, and has been finding the end zone. Actually got the end zone 3 times in this past week's game on Thursday Night Football, and he's got a long week of rest here heading into this matchup against the Atlanta Falcons. So love what I'm seeing there. Saquon Barkley, a little bit of a change-up, 18 or more opportunities per game for Saquon Barkley to start this season. For me, it is clear that he is a workhorse running back right now. We've seen that explosiveness and confidence reassert itself in him, and that's been super fun to watch here. He ripped a big 36-yard touchdown run, I want to say, on Monday Night Football against the Giants, and again, injuries have been the issue for him throughout his career. He looks confident, fully healthy, and as if he's a player we can put our full confidence in here for the first time in a long time. So moving forward, Saquon doesn't necessarily have the same floor as guys like maybe a JT or Nick Chubb in terms of just your overall evaluation of them through 17 games, but that ceiling is an absolute monster that can turn its head and rip off some big numbers in any given week. Christian McCaffrey here, a guy who's taking on the Arizona Cardinals. This Panthers offense has been an utter disgrace. It has pissed me off trying to watch these games. It's just it's a tough watch. It really is. And CMC has been the really lone bright spot here. He's had 80% or higher of the team's snap share for the running back position in 2 of the 3 weeks. The other week, he went at 91%. So he is being used at a workhorse level. He's got back-to-back games here with north of 100 yards of rushing. That's awesome to see. But what we need more of is get the dang ball downfield and score touchdowns. It's not really his fault. It's a Baker Mayfield and overall offensive product issue. He also needs some more opportunity in the receiving game. I would love to see these numbers continue to jack themselves up to the highs we've seen them at in years past. But right now, it looks as if he is, while healthy, having a really strong floor for the current point in time, but the ceiling still hasn't necessarily been fully tapped into here. And then Derrick Henry, our last player in this tier, 5 guys in the elite running backs 1 tier for this week. in matchups where I think the Titans can have a positive game script and control, or at least stay within a respectable range in that football game, Derrick Henry's an elite running back one for me. This Colts team is a matchup that I think the Titans kind of have the number of, and this could be bad news for Jonathan Taylor. Maybe he gets kind of knocked down a peg here and has one of those, he needs to have that high floor performance because maybe the ceiling just doesn't work out if the Colts continue to just do completely blundering things and just on their, weekly game script. I think that Frank Reich needs to just run the freaking ball on first and second down more and stop trying to be too cute with the statue of a quarterback. But besides the point, we're talking Derrick Henry here. I think Tennessee's got a good outlook for this game. I think Mike Vrabel's got a really good feel for how to approach this Colts defense. And I think that Derrick Henry will be a heavy emphasis and focal point for that offensive attack here. So those are my elite running back ones here. Let's dive into the strong RB1s tier for the next group. All right, so 4 names going in this tier here, starting off with Joe Mixon against Miami on Thursday Night Football. I really like the opportunity for all Bengals offensive players this week, given the fact that the Dolphins just played a really long game in which their defense was on the field for a really large portion of time. The Buffalo Bills dominated in time of possession, and I think that fatigue will naturally run its course here, especially in the second half of this game, assuming that Cincinnati keeps it close for the first half, which they are. 4.5-point favorites, I believe, right now on most sports books. So Joe Mixon, for me, is someone that I really like this week. The issue is, of course, an ankle injury, but he's a full participant at practice on Tuesday. Good news going forward for him here. Austin Eckler, the big thing here, no red zone opportunities or not a substantial enough amount of looks. He's 32nd in total red zone touches. That's what's killing his fantasy value here. He's the current he's the current full PPR running back 13 right now, but you drafted him to be a top 3 to 5 player at worst. You thought you were drafting an incredibly dynamic asset who had 20 touchdowns a season ago. This year, he has 4 total touches inside the 20-yard line, and he has 0 goal line carries. So no touchdowns, of course, as well. Hasn't gotten any big rips for scores. So he is entirely dependent on touchdown productivity right now. His rushing numbers have been heinously inefficient. It's been a brutal sight to watch. They are, of course, against the Houston Texans this week. A manageable matchup. I expect the Chargers to win this game, but I'm very, very concerned about what Austin Eckler brings to the table in terms of him giving value back to us. Najee Harris here taking on the Jets. Look, this is an inefficient Steelers offense, but you've got yourself a workhorse running back here, a guy who can catch the football in space and also play some physical football on the ground as well. So at the end of the day, it's going to come down to getting enough touches. I think this is a very favorable game script here. Zach Wilson's first game back. Yes, no TJ Watt for the Steelers defense, but I do think they're able to control this game, have their way, maybe get a couple takeaways from Zach Wilson, and ultimately get this thing rolling here. And that benefits Najee Harris because a positive game script is going to be more opportunities on the groundwork for him. So Najee Harris, a fringe strong running back one, if that makes sense, being the last of the 2 names or the second half of the 4 names in this tier. That probably didn't make any sense. I apologize. Just disregard what I just said there. But Leonard Fournette here, moving into our 9th ranked running back this week against the Kansas City Chiefs. For Lenny, plain and simple, I don't doubt his involvement in these phases of the game. We actually saw him do very well in one of these areas, that being the receiving phase of things against the Packers in week 3, but he needs more consistent red zone and receiving game use. Now, I think that the red zone opportunities will come as Kansas City's offense begins to progress forward here. So I think that it's a matter of time for Tampa Bay. I think I might have just said Kansas City. I totally apologize, guys. If I'm not, I'm totally just going crazy and thinking through random stuff in my head right now as I'm speaking. But Leonard Fournette, I think that the positive, those valuable and critical touches will start coming here. He is a total workhorse for this Buccaneers offense right now, and someone that I want on my fantasy team. So despite the fact that the production has been kind of underwhelming and hasn't been something that's super exciting here, I think that that's going to start trending in a positive direction as soon as and as early as potentially this week 4 matchup against the Kansas City Chiefs. Again, hopefully I didn't misspeak there. Regardless, you probably think I'm a bit crazy right now. I'm going to move us into our bubble running back ones tier now. Just 3 names in this category, but 3 guys that I think could do some really nice things here. Jamal Williams is my favorite of the 3 to potentially balloon himself higher up this tier list and obviously outperform my expectations for him. But I didn't want to heap too much expectation on him, if that makes sense, because after all, he is a reserve running back now. He's a very skilled and complete 3-down back. He plays very physical football. He's not afraid to put his shoulder pads down into someone and drive those legs. He plays with like a fun and like foolish ferocity, if that makes sense. If you know Jamal Williams, seeing him in the locker room, he's a goofy guy. He's a funny dude. Look back to last week when you saw like 7 hip thrusts in a row after he scored his touchdown. So he's a fun-loving guy, but man, he takes football serious. He plays physical, rough-styled, throwback running back type, just in terms of what his skill set is here. But he can also catch the football as well. So you've got a dynamic player that can catch passes out in space and contribute in that phase of things. Of course, the intrigue here is that we're expecting no DeAndre Swift with a shoulder sprain. The Seahawks matchup allowed a career-high rushing total for Cordero Patterson last week, and I just think that all things considered, it's a very good recipe for success in a game script that should play out favorably as well. So Jamal Williams, super confident about him this week. Javonte Williams now taking on the Las Vegas Raiders. This is 2 struggling teams. Both of them, I would argue, despite the fact that Denver has 2 wins, are in do-or-die must-win games, especially for Las Vegas, which does scare me a little bit, the emotional element of things going beyond the numbers. How hard is this team to come out and play? Because if you go down 0-4, your season is basically over here. So I think that you could continue to see some struggles from Denver offensively in this game. We did see Russ start to move around in the pocket and have a little bit less rigidness back there, so hopefully that starts to open up the defense here, make them respect him as a threat a bit more, and allow the averages and the yards per touch to go up for both Javonte and Melvin Gordon in the backfield. But, of course, his versatility as a pass catcher and potential goal line back, they kind of split those goal line carries between him and Melvin fairly evenly. Melvin's probably a little bit ahead right now. I should go back and check those numbers. Officially here, you can do that via playerprofiler.com. It's a really good space to get some advanced analytics. But for Javonte Williams, I'm still really comfortable with his outlook here. I'm not panicking on him yet for this season. I think Denver is still growing into what they can be offensively. Of course they are. I mean, if this is their ceiling, this is probably the worst ceiling in the history of offensive football. But in this Raiders matchup, there is obviously some things that scare us just based off of the first 3 weeks. But I do think he has a chance to be a top 12 play if things break his way. Same thing for Aaron Jones here. I see flaws. I see imperfections. He does worry me a little bit. It's a split backfield just like Denver is, just like some other backfields, Cleveland to an extent, but we've seen Nick Chubb really overcome that early in the year. What Aaron Jones can do, though, is be extremely versatile. He's a good pass catcher. He's really able to be used in multi-formational looks, meaning you can start him in the slot, motion him into the backfield, do orbit motions with him, all kinds of stuff. I mean, he's one of the most versatile players on this entire Packers offense. He probably is right now, and they just need to give him the football. So what this comes down to every week for me is, are each A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon's really done this to a great extent, getting 15 or more opportunities per game. But for Aaron Jones, is he just going to get enough quality touches? Will he get a pass out in space and be able to get some good run after a catch? Will he get a red zone attempt inside the 20-yard line? And like we saw him do in week 2 against Chicago, be really efficient with those touches and find the end zone twice. So it's never a lock that Aaron Jones is going to be a viable lineup play here, but his ceiling is fantastic when he does. This Patriots matchup is when I expect the Packers to control handily and have a really good game script coming into that matchup. Now I'm going to jump us into my elite running backs too here. Just 3 names on the list here: Alvin Kamara, Cordero Patterson, and James Robinson. For Alvin Kamara, it's plain and simple. You're playing a weird game slate on an 8:30 in the morning NFL game in London. So for me, I'm in Central Time. That's where that 8:30 number comes from. It's going to vary depending on what place in the world you're located in here, but Alvin Kamara's got a weird slate, so make sure to set your lineups and have that stuff ready to go. But you've got another week post rib injury. Hopefully that's healing up a little bit here, and then he just needs opportunities. I talked about this a bit earlier in another episode this week, but he's not essentially your traditional workhorse running back. He needs to be efficient in the passing game, be a flanking option for Jameis out of the backfield, and he's gotten targets in that area. He just hasn't converted at a high level, so that's a bit problematic for me. Not something I love to see. We do need some red zone opportunities for AK as well. Mark Ingram got the nod on the goal line last week, although he is a smaller running back. So it's just going to be coming down to opportunities, how the game plays out here. If they're able to cash in on those pass game looks, that's what's going to be ultimately kind of the deciding factor here for Alvin Kamara this week. Cordero Patterson coming off a career high. I touched on this earlier. Career high yardage in the running department. He was fantastic. We had him as a must-start player last week. Pat on the back to myself there. Crushed the Seahawks. Completely ran all over him. I think he hurdled a dude at one point too, and just looked like a freak of nature. This is one of the most interesting players in fantasy fantasy football, being a guy who broke out in his age 30 season at the running back position, and then, turns that into a second consecutive year of success here for that Falcons offense. So I love his versatility. I wish they'd get him involved more in the pass game this season, but maybe with Kyle Pitts and Drake London, they don't feel the need to do that as much. He has been a bit dependent on his ability to do things as a pure rusher. So again, he's very capable of doing things in the receiving game. He scored a whopping amount of points last week and was super happy with what I saw from him. But again, maybe not depending on that every single week to be the expectation. Taking on Cleveland this week, a tougher defense, a tougher front. So a bit of a harder barrier to entry for those high ceiling games. And then finally here, James Robinson taking on the Philadelphia Eagles. This is a tougher game script potentially for J-Rob than we've seen the last couple of weeks. My issue for him last week was the Chargers. Had Justin Herbert been healthy, I expected to really give them a run for their money and really be a competitive football team and maybe even get up multiple scores on the Jacksonville offense. But the Jags totally blew them out of the water. It was completely reversed. I actually bet the Jags early in the week plus 7 points, so plus a touchdown underdogs, if you're not familiar with betting terms and whatnot. I made some money there. That was a fun game. James Robinson and that offense just blew them out of the water. Herbert had a couple nice completions early, and then it was a complete and utter disaster. So J-Rob's an awesome player. His efficiency looked great after having a big touchdown run last week again, and he's just someone that at this point in time is becoming more and more of a necessity in lineups. It seems like the deeper in the season we get, the more we can be bullish on J-Rob and the more we're having to fade Travis Etienne, unfortunately. Poor guy's down here on the screen, so it still has an option. Might show up on the tier list eventually this week, but not right now. James Robinson looks to be the more valuable fantasy asset of the two after being a much more underrated draft day commodity. So Philadelphia, though, like I said, there are other concerns for potentially needing Etienne, that passing game in the backfield a bit more. We'll see how that game script and dynamic plays out. But for now, it looks like J-Rob is an elite running back 2 for this season. Alrighty, here we go. Before we dive into our strong running back 2s for this week, this episode is presented to you guys by Underdog Fantasy, one of my great friends here at SFS. If you guys head down in the description of today's video, there'll be a link down there to sign up for Underdog. If you use promo code SFS, they're going to double your first deposit up to $100. You can put $100 in, get $200 to play with, or you can just put $10 in and have $20 to play with on that platform. All yours to keep and have a fun time with playing over and under contests with different player props. Some of my favorite stuff to do is to make a 3 or 4 leg parlay on Sunday afternoons for those main game slates and just put together some players that I like, and you can potentially 20x your money if you put 5 guys together in a 5 leg parlay. So super fun stuff on there. You can also do drafts for individual game slates for NFL, NBA, NHL, whatever your favorite sport is. I hope it's football here, obviously, with you guys tuning in to the SFS channel, but they've got a ton of variety for sports to choose from, different ways to make money, and to have a little extra fun and competition on those games. They've got, of course, like I said, drafts as well that you can take place in and just pick players from that game and day that those games are taking place. So one more time, promo code SFS on Underdog Fantasy. If you guys take advantage of that, you'll get access to my website on sizzlefantasy.com, which includes my weekly positional rankings for all positions, quarterbacks, running backs, defenses, wide receivers, and tight ends here, as well as access to my DMs on the community Discord server to ask me all of your personal questions about your fantasy teams every single week. So check out Underdog, code SFS, link is in the description of today's video. Kicking off the strong RB2s here, Dalvin Cook is the first one. There's not too much more analysis needed. Then you've got a tough matchup against the New Orleans Saints here in a different country with Kirk Cousins in a technically primetime game here. So I'm staying away from that matchup. Dalvin Cook is a player who also is injured right now. He's got a shoulder issue that made him doubtful to return to last week's game. He did suffer a dislocated shoulder last season, though, in 2021. Was able to recover from that, play the Pittsburgh Steelers, and he absolutely carved him up. So we'll see what the, end result is here. I think he'll play. We'll see how efficient he's able to be, if the Saints run defense is able to shut him down, all that good stuff, though. I would start him still probably this week, of course, having him as a strong running back to play. Obviously, just not having the same expectations I would in a traditional matchup. Khalil Herbert here for the Chicago Bears. David Montgomery is also week to week with a ankle/knee issue. We'll see if he plays this week. Of course, if he does, I'm expecting a limited role for him. Maybe that would still make Herbert a flex option, but for now, while I'm recording this, it seems like Khalil Khalil is the better option of the two for fantasy lineups, again with some uncertainty on Montgomery. And I did see a report that the injured reserve is not off the table for him right now. So Herbert was totally dominant, had 20 touches for over 100, or 20 rushes, rushing attempts for over 150 yards from that offensive front there. Played 60% of the snaps last week, was super, super efficient and productive with his opportunities, and added on 2 more receptions for 12 yards and a total of 169 total yards on the day. So awesome stuff there. Love to see that. And obviously against the Giants this week, I think it'll be a fairly competitive game. 2 bad football teams by my estimation. I don't care that either of them are 2-1. I think they're both bad football teams. So Khalil Herbert is definitely a lineup play without Montgomery this week. James Conner here taking on the Panthers. For me, my skepticism with James Conner in lineups this week is simply health related. It's an ankle issue for me. We saw him worked in a bit last week, but again, the Cardinals had more struggles offensively. It's been a really ugly show for them to start this season, and we haven't gotten James Conner as many red zone opportunities as he did last year. This offense just hasn't been as high powered, and they've really struggled to move the football downfield. So my hope and expectation is that they get things on track. I think they really finally picked up the passing game with Hollywood Brown last week. 17 targets to him, 14 receptions, 140 yards, at least helped them move the chains, but they have to be more efficient. They have to be able to get this ball in scoring territory at a higher frequency to get guys like James Conner the opportunity to score the football. Of course, his season has started rough here because of this ankle issue and because of game script problems in Game 1 against Kansas City where they were wiped off the map. So we need something to change here in Arizona. I think this is a matchup that they should control. The Cardinals should win this game, but we'll see how things play out here this Sunday afternoon. Again, strong running backs 2 tier here. Dameon Pierce taking on the LA Chargers. Dameon Pierce is someone that I think could potentially get screwed in the event that the Texans get blown out in this game, but with still an unhealthy Justin Herbert, not 100%. I don't know how highly functional this Chargers offense will be, and therefore maybe the Texans can keep this one close and continue running the ball at a high level throughout the game. So we saw some decent efficiency, 40 yards per carry from him in his first official, workhorse lead of that backfield last week. He's a physical runner. He's the goal line back for this offense. Have optimism with him, of course, because of that situation there. And then Miles Sanders. Miles Sanders is someone who I think will bounce back here this week. The Philadelphia Eagles taking on the Jacksonville Jags here. Like I talked about with J-Rob, I expect the Eagles to kind of control the pace of this game and really dictate the style of football they want to play. Miles has been getting more opportunities than I initially expected for him in draft season. I liked him as a sleeper candidate at his draft position this season, but really his opportunity has just plain and simple been better than what I was anticipating for the year. So if he gets enough work, if he gets enough opportunities here, he should be a top 24 play. Antonio Gibson, unfortunately, someone trending down my rankings right now. I actually looked. He has dropped in his opportunities in this offense every single week of the season, but thankfully he scored touchdowns in back-to-back games, which has kind of saved his community-wide stock price. I'm also just in general looking to sell him right now because of Brian Robinson's quick recovery here and anticipated return. But for me, Gibson's going to need to probably find the end zone again here. He's a touchdown-dependent RB2, but I do like the matchup. I do think that there's still an opportunity to take advantage of a Cooper Rush-led offense by the defensive side of the ball for Washington. So if they can get the ball in this offense's hands a little bit more, potentially climb those rushing attempts for Antonio Gibson and get him some passing game work as well, that's stuff I would like to see there. But again, that's kind of asking a lot of stuff to go right. You could honestly argue that each of these last 3 players could be in the bubble RB2 category, but I do feel that their matchups warrant them being in this tier. For Jeff Wilson, it's simply just a physicality thing, taking on the LA Rams, the 49ers versus Rams this week. I've talked about this a few times as well. I value San Francisco's physicality. I value the offensive brand of football they play, and I think that gives them a great advantage here for this week's game. So I think they'll have success running the ball. We know Debo's going to take some touches, but Wilson had over 100 yards from scrimmage, did fumble the game away, but was very productive and efficient with his touches last week. And then A.J. Dillon here. Dillon's taking on the Patriots. We talked about this with Aaron Jones. For me, I think that they're going to control this game. I think they're going to be able to just kind of salt the game away and really drain the clock for the last quarter and a half of this thing here. And that starts with A.J. Dillon, a guy who I think also in red zone opportunities where they get near the goal line, he's their preferred back here. Whereas inside the 20, they'll still give it to Aaron Jones, maybe still, up until the 5-yard line. They will give him some goal line opportunities here and there occasionally, but Dillon being the bigger back, being a competent pass catcher as well, and again, 15 or more opportunities per game is intriguing for me, and that makes him in this week's matchups a strong running back 2 candidate. Into our bubble running back 2s here, we've got Josh Jacobs, Ezekiel Elliott, Ramondre Stevenson, and Breece Hall. For me, Josh Jacobs is a guy who last week showed some ability to be used in both phases of the game, both the rushing and receiving aspects, but I do have concerns about this overall Las Vegas offense. Again, I think they're very flawed. There is something just not quite right here, and they're struggling to put out touchdowns at an efficient clip. Devontae Adams hasn't been nearly as involved as I expected or believe that he should be. So overall, this offense gives me some trouble. A Denver defense taking on them this week that's very tough. It's an in-division game as well. So I think that Jacobs is going to be fairly touchdown dependent in this matchup, and he hasn't scored one yet this year. So that is also a red flag for me. Ezekiel Elliott taking on Washington here, a very winnable matchup, if that makes sense. I think that he'll get his opportunities, but this is a split backfield. So your ceiling for workhorse level numbers are kind of capped to an extent. I do think that he does have some lineup consideration in standard formats, but he hasn't been getting too much pass game work. That's been heading more the direction of Tony Pollard, who hasn't even been seeing a super high clip on a consistent basis here to start this year. So for me, there's a hard ceiling for what Zeke can be right now. I'm staying away from him when I can, but otherwise I understand that he's potentially a top 24 option for some of your lineups. Ramondre Stevenson here, my preferred Patriots running back going forward. I think in this week's game, if you're trailing the guy who has a higher snap share percentage the last 2 weeks and a player who has been more efficient in the rushing department, should see some run in the pass game, third down work for this Brian Hoyer-led Pats offense. Bill Belichick came out and said Hoyer will be the starter if Mac Jones can't go. I don't imagine he does. I think that makes Stevenson the more valuable play here, again with a negative game script. And then Breece Hall had his first team lead in running back snap share in week 3, 51% to 49% Michael Carter. Also 11 targets. Now that could drop off as Zach Wilson returning here. Zach Wilson could also just really throw a cog in things for this offense, but for me, Breece Hall is the guy to have in that Jets backfield. And then our last 4 names here are RB3s, are Kareem Hunt, Rashad Penny, Damian Harris, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Kareem Hunt for me is just a touchdown dependent RB2. If he scores a TD, he'll be a top 24 play. If he doesn't, he may not be. We saw him get goal line work on Thursday Night Football last week. He's got a long week of rest here against the Falcons. Not the easiest rushing defense to go against here, but we have seen that Hunt does get those valuable touches. So if he gets a premium goal line attempt or 2, cashes one in, he'll probably go north of 10 points and be a top 24 play for PPR, half PPR formats. But if not, you're looking at potentially a low-end flex option. Rashad Penny, as unfortunate as it is to toss this in our analysis, Travis Homer, who's been involved in that running back by committee offense, just went to the IR. So now it's kind of the Penny, Walker, and DJ Dallas show there, limiting that other backfield usage a little bit. It's not a super huge thing to factor in here, but they are playing Detroit this week, a very exploitable defense on the ground. I think that if they can keep this game close, Penny could see some good opportunity. We also saw his snap count percentage go up this past week. Damian Harris, again, touchdown dependent as always. I think with Ramondre Stevenson showing a prominent role here going forward and being the higher used running back in terms of just play time, we've seen Harris get more consistent goal line work and stuff like that, but Stevenson did find a goal line carry result in a touchdown last week. I'm a bit skeptical here. No touchdowns, no Moss for lineup level play. And then Clyde Edwards-Helaire here, a guy who had 0 rushing yards last week but scored a touchdown. And this is very troubling to me. He's only played 41% of snaps, and he hasn't played more than 44% of snaps in any given game this season. He's got less of a snap share than Jerick McKinnon has in this offense, and he has a high touchdown conversion rate, averaging 1 per game right now. So with less than 50%, that's not something that's sustainable to me. And I think that despite the fact that Andy Reid has loved him in the opening drives of games so far this season, we might see some drop-off. Tampa Bay's defense is very stout here. So those are my top 31 running backs, actually, for Week 4 fantasy football. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. And also, let me know what you guys want to see next for other content. If you have any ideas for me, leave that stuff down there as well. Of course, click the subscribe button. Check out the links in the description of today's episode, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace out.